Welcome, everybody. This is Hugh Massie, the CEO and founder of DNA Behavior International. And today I'm delighted to be hosting another identity conversation. And I have with me Kelly Gallimore from the Consilium Financial Group. And Kelly is a financial consultant there and has been working with the team leadership and us for the past 10 years or so, using the DNA behavior systems, particularly financial DNA, as a wealth mentor with her clients. So welcome, Kelly.
Thank you.
So it's great to be able to spend time with you today. So just to get started, why don't you just tell me a little bit about your life and career background, what's got you to this place of working with Consilium, working in client service, interest in human behavior, and I think you've got some not-for-profit activities as well that you do. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, as far as my life, I'll start out just to kind of give you an idea. I have been married almost 39 years to my high school sweetheart, and we have 2 grown sons, 2 wonderful daughters-in-law, and now 3 grandchildren. I was one of those people, I don't know if it has anything to do with my strategist profile or just fear on my part, but I'm now a grandmother of 3 grandsons, and I was very nervous about that. I wasn't sure I would be a good grandmother. The joke in my family was I wasn't a very nurturing mom. So much to my surprise, I'm great at that and I love doing it. So that's one component of who I am. And then what I do is, as Hugh said, I'm a financial consultant and I use my training as a wealth mentor. And really I see being a financial consultant as being a mentor or as being more of a counselor. So certainly there are a lot of numbers that are involved in that. But for me, it's about the relationship. And how can I get to know this individual and how can I help them define their goals and then plug in the numbers to help them reach those goals. Hugh mentioned my nonprofit work, and that is something that really stemmed from some clients that just came to our team through referrals, and they all happened to be widows. And what my colleague Kirk and I in particular began to see was that although these were bright, intelligent, competent women in a vulnerable state, they weren't really equipped to make the best decisions for their financial future. So he and I co-founded Women Renewed, and it's a nonprofit group that is committed to financial education for women. And then we take that a step further, and for women with little to no means, we even offer some very basic financial planning to them as well. So it all comes back to, though, I believe, the mentoring, the counseling, helping people to understand who they are and where they want to go and what needs to be in place financially to make that happen.
Well, that's a great service that you're doing, and particularly to be able to help the widowed women in that way. I mean, it must be, my mum was a widow at a pretty young age with me and my brother. Well, I was 1 and my brother wasn't born. I sort of know, well, I obviously wasn't exactly in my mother's shoes, but I was a son. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty frightening prospect to be widowed and have to make financial choices, potentially put food on the table mm-hmm. for the family, and deal with, probably in many cases, deal with things they've never had to deal with before.
Absolutely. And I'm similar. My mother was widowed when I was 6 years old. So I think that, like you, even though I don't know what it feels like to be widowed, I know what it feels like to be in a household like that. And anything we can do to prepare on the front end. And that's what we began to see is if we had been in the picture sooner rather than after the fact, then perhaps some of the decisions and then some of the, frankly, unscrupulous advisors that are out there wouldn't have had an opportunity to take advantage of them.
And are you sharing those experiences also with, I suppose I don't want to say any couple is normal, because nothing's normal in this world, but with, if you get a husband and wife that come in their, in their 40s, 50s, or even 30s, do you share those experiences of what happens if one of them's not there and anymore, and about educating both of them, decisions have got to be made? Is that part of what you do when you're working with the clients?
It absolutely is. And part of the comprehensive financial planning process is estate planning. And that is the component really that I enjoy the most. So I help them, a couple, as an example, husband and wife, on the front end with making sure that they have the proper documents in place, educating them on what they need to do, even outside a will, to make those transitions easier, making sure that both spouses are engaged in the planning process. One thing I've heard many times from widows that may come to me, maybe they already had a financial advisor when they were married, but they sought me out maybe because they needed help with the estate administration or whatever might bring them to me. But something I hear consistently is, well, that advisor was my husband's advisor. I never felt that he or she was my advisor. And that's quite a telling statement. And so we want to make sure that we have both engaged. And then this is where the DNA comes in, is we're engaging them in the way that they want to be engaged, but making sure everyone is on the same page and knows what's going on.
Because it's got to be a very inclusive conversation, hasn't it? At the end, at the end of the day, and if someone's left out in the cold, let's say it is the female spouse is left out in the cold, and the male spouse has made most of the decisions or run roughshod over it, it doesn't help long term.
Not at all. And sometimes, and this is something that's interesting to me, is that sometimes it's just a very close relationship. There's not any kind of roughshod or being left out in the cold, but to use the wife as an example, she just simply doesn't want to be engaged. Yeah. And we had a client join us just a few years ago, and she said, well, I don't even know what he earns in his job, just completely disengaged from any part of that. And wasn't that he didn't welcome her in, it wasn't that she wasn't capable, but that's something that we try to change from the very beginning and stress the importance of that.
Yeah, because I imagine there's quite a lot of blocked conversations at the start of a relationship. When a new client comes to see you, a new couple come and see you, there's quite a lot of blockages somewhere in the conversation. Either someone doesn't want to engage, on one side or the other, or there's some kind of shame there or embarrassment potentially. There's lots of reasons for that.
There are. Sometimes it's just insecurity about it, coming from different walks of life could be part of it. And occasionally we see a situation where one spouse doesn't listen to the other. Sometimes we think we're more marriage counselors than we are financial consultants. Try not to get too deep into that, but we have had to tell a couple in the past that they needed to go get counseling and then come back to us. So just trying to zone in on what they need and help them articulate why they have come to us. And then that helps us then to know how to progress.
So what do you think is, your magic in all of that, in helping the clients open up more, talk, to move the process along and get that sharing going on? What's your gift in all of that, Kelly?
I've been told, and I think I have found this to be true, that I'm really good at asking the right questions. So I may just ask a single question, that will then spin off into an entire discussion that will give us a wealth of insight about the individual. So really listening to them on the front end and honing in on what is the right question that's going to get us where we need to go, even before we talk about the financial engagement.
Yeah. So you're able to empathize, though, with them as to the situation. You understand personally quite a lot of the issues of widowhood and what could happen. And then asking the right question with that helps unlock the conversation.
It does indeed. And even when it's not with a widow, whether it's a couple or, whether it's with a man or a woman or whomever, I'm really good at looking at a situation and seeing right into the heart of it, really assessing the landscape pretty quickly. And that just helps me to know where I need to lead them, for lack of a better phrase, just to get them to a place of understanding where they really want to go, but just don't know how to articulate.
So you mentioned before that you're a strategist and, you completed your financial DNA discovery, I don't know, 10 years ago when you were formerly at Ronald Blue, but let's say it was 10 years ago. It's quite a while ago now. And Kirk did it as well. I can remember going through that with him at one of the seminars. But when you completed your financial DNA and got the results back, how did you feel about it, or what did you think, and what did it say to you?
It really resonated with me that, yes, this is who I am. And I was pretty far along. Well, I would say I was pretty far along in my career when I did this, but not necessarily in this industry. This is a second career for me.
Yeah.
But I remember wishing that I had had this insight into myself when I was a lot younger and just starting out in my career, in 20s and 30s. Because it just really explained a lot, and it explained a lot of why I'm good at what I'm good at. It explained a lot about hiccups and struggles that I had along the way. I think I could have been saved maybe a little bit of those if I had had this insight when I was earlier in my career.
So what was the clarity that you got about your strengths and what you were good at?
As a strategist, I'm very bottom line, very goal oriented, and it seems a little bit like a contrast because I care deeply about people, but then I like to see action being taken. And it just helped me to see that whatever the relationship might be, I'm really focused on the goal. And sometimes that has hindered me in relationships, whatever the goal may be. It may not be financial or material at all, but sometimes I'm hindered if I focus too much on that and not enough on the other person. Coupled with that, I'm an introvert, but I'm a highly verbal person. And so learning how to balance another person's expectations, because I'm so verbal, I tend to be treated like an extrovert. And then there can be a misunderstanding when then I don't behave like an extrovert. So just knowing that about myself helped me to communicate better who I am and perhaps understand a little bit better where the other person is coming from.
But if you said, and I'm an initiator, and I'm very similar to you in many ways, with the being very goal driven and introverted or reflective, in my nature. So sometimes there's a lot. For me, there may not always be a reaction going on, but the brain is definitely working overtime.
Definitely hard to shut it off.
Yeah, it's very busy, but if we zero in on the goals word, I mean, whilst it's got you into trouble at times, being goals focused has also been a strength. It's been part of the your success formula to some degree with clients, I think.
Yes, yes. And I think the goal component, if I change the word from goal to purpose, whether it's from 5 years ago when our team created Consilium Financial Group and started from scratch to stand up the company, in putting things in place, even operationally, stepping back to say, okay, what is the purpose of this? Why are we doing this way? And then with clients, before I even go into a meeting, when I prepare, asking myself, what is the purpose of this meeting? What needs to be the focus? And then that purpose becomes the goal, and working to keep my purpose for the meeting in alignment with what's really important, which is the client's purpose, then that is where that goal-driven trait has served me very, very well.
Yeah, so in a way, purpose is probably a better word to goals. It's easier for people to hear, but it's still about keeping, whether it's your firm and team centered on the objective or the goal, but also the clients is, I think, is what you're saying is the key strength. What about implementation? Is that something that's big as well, a strength for you? Do you do a lot of implementation work?
I do. I joke within our team, we have one, Kirk, who you've spent a lot of time with, who is the 30,000-foot visionary, very good thinker. Do not expect him to execute anything at all. Andy is opposite, not to say that he's not a visionary, but he is the really operations, implementation, business side of things. And I'm in the middle between the two. And I've joked a lot that I'm really the bridge. I mean, we all, the relationship is good, but just in functionality, sometimes I think of myself as the bridge in the role that I play, because I can sit down with Kurt and see the vision and get excited about it. But I can equally sit down with Andy and say, okay, this is something that needs to happen. How are we going to execute this? And then I can work side by side with him to do that. So I think, I don't know if it's unique or not, but I think being able to live in both those worlds has been a good thing.
Yeah, so I think being a bridge is important. Do you find that you're a bridge with the clients as well? A lot of the time, if a husband and wife is in front of you, they will be different too. Their styles will be different. Do you find that you're the bridge between the two of them to achieving their purpose?
Sometimes. Sometimes it can be as broad as their purpose. To get a little more granular, in a situation we have with a young couple, 3 young children, and the wife just feels really strongly that she wants to start saving for their education. Not a bad thing. It's a very good thing.
Yeah.
The husband is saying, I'm not worried about that because of what we have in place. I think we're going to far exceed what we're going to need for that. And based on their financial plan, I would say he's probably right. Really, there's no need for them to open a 529 and start putting it away. But then one thing that I spoke into that was, you don't have to front load it right now and give up your cash. But it would mean a lot to her if she just saw a little bit every month going into that, just to see that there's something earmarked. You've got it earmarked in your head. She needs to see that it's earmarked in a more tangible way. And so I think that's an example of a bridge. With the DNA, one thing that I have found very useful is we do our own risk tolerance questionnaires. But then, as you know, on the financial DNA, there is a section that lets us see, okay, are they capital preservation or are they aggressive? And invariably, one spouse will put more input into our questionnaire than the other. But then when we sit down with the DNA, we can say, okay, one of you's way over here, the other one's on the opposite end of the structure, and your risk tolerance says you're one of these extremes. And so that's a great opportunity for conversation to really clarify the objectives for the investment and where do they really need to be, and not just blend them.
And again, that's sort of playing that bridge role, because it's helping each of them objectively see where they're at on that. And going back to your 529 example with the education funding, just to help both sides of the couple understand that she probably was more cautious and needed to know the money will be there. Because it's one thing for him to say when he's 35 or 38 years old, yeah, the money is there and it will be there, but life can take turns, can't it? Or, events can happen and it may not be. And that would be frightening.
Exactly.
And if she was to ever be widowed, she would absolutely want to know where it was.
No doubt.
For that purpose. So that's where these conversations are so important, to bring the couples together. So I think playing that bridge role is very important, Kelly. And it seems like you as a strategist are able to do that. In understanding the vision of the plans, the details, the structure. That's a real gift for you.
I've learned to see it that way, definitely. But that is one of the things that I enjoy about the planning. And I think even with just the comprehensive financial plan, that if everything goes as you want, you have your goals, you know where you want to be in 5 years, 10 years, we're putting strategies in place so that can happen. But then I really like the estate side in strategizing to say, okay, but what if life does take a turn? Yeah. What would you want to happen if a tragedy struck? And then helping them talk through and hopefully making it easier for them to talk through these things, and just to bring it down to not talking about their death, but saying, what would you want to happen? If you can just imagine this for a moment, and then just keeping it conversational. I've been on too many sides in my estate administration service. I've been on the side of having to unwind things and deal with complexities in probate that were unnecessary, just because that piece of planning wasn't done.
And it probably wasn't the conversation up front.
No, not always. And of course, I can't force anyone to do anything. I have a client that Kirk's been serving for over 20 years. I've been serving alongside him 10 years, still hasn't done a will. So
oh, wow.
We can have the conversation. And sometimes that's the frustrating thing to me, perhaps as a strategist, because I'm going, okay, you told me what you wanted to happen. We have given you a plan to follow. You have to execute the plan. I can only say the same thing. And so I try to communicate, maybe try the way I communicate, try to make it as clear as possible. But at the end of the day, not everyone is going to implement the plan that we give them. And that is something that, as a strategist and a goal-oriented person and someone who seeks to understand someone else's purpose, finds very frustrating.
Sure. And has he got a family?
Actually, it's a couple. They never had children, but the husband passed away a few years ago, and the wife had to walk through everything with probate without any documents. And I really thought that would be the thing that would get everything more buttoned up, but we're gradually getting there, but not just yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing situation, but sometimes, look, people have baggage, and there's other reasons or commitments and things that they're, have difficulty dealing with, and maybe you're not going to win every time. with that, but that would be a pity for something to happen to him in this case, and it not be documented. But particularly if there's not children, so that's probably less concern. He's probably less worried about it from that reason, but still,
yeah. But even though I may get frustrated, I still feel like, our entire firm, if anything, we overserve. But our biggest thing is that we give absolutely stellar service. And every job I've ever had from the time I was 13 years old has been a service-oriented job. And just making sure that widow knows that I'm here.
Yeah.
And when she's ready, I'm here. And for the parts of the services that I offer that she wants to engage in, I'm going to go above and beyond as much as I can to help her with those.
So in delivering this stellar service, what have the clients said back to you and the firm as to why the service has been so good?
Actually, we had one just the other day. It's a gentleman who is approaching retirement. We've been working with a number of years and just really put things in place to help him bring that to fruition. And he said, listen, guys, I appreciate your counsel so much. I don't worry about anything. And he has taken every step that we've recommended. And in a world, take the market, for instance, of course, there's no predicting anything ever, but in a climate where we expect more and more volatility, he said, you know what? I'm not even worried. I know that you care about me. I know you can't make any guarantees, but I trust your counsel implicitly. And that's really the feedback that we get most often, is that our clients trust us. And I believe that service that we provided has earned that trust. We can't make any guarantees about the markets, but we can promise availability and good thinking.
Yeah, so I was going to say, what builds the trust? Because you can't control the market. So what you're saying is it's availability and good thinking, reliability.
I would say reliability. I think transparency too.
Yeah.
We don't bare our souls to every client in every arena, but if there's something about my own story or something I can share that I believe will resonate with the client, letting them know that I have struggles too. I think that's a big part of it. And I think just letting them know that we care is paramount. That I'm going to develop a strategy and make recommendations based on what's important to that individual.
Yeah, because I think that's a big part that you just said then is letting them know that you care. It's the empathy. And I think what I was sensing from the earlier part of our conversation, Kelly, is, you understand and have empathy for a widow. And that is something that not everybody would be able to demonstrate perhaps in the same way. And that's something that's very important. And I think getting across to the clients why it's so important to have a will, so that their partner doesn't end up in a bad place when the inevitable event happens, and it could happen by surprise. It
certainly could, just like you and I both shared. I think both our situations were definitely by surprise. And then even after that, I remember a situation with a client who had been widowed. It was still pretty new within the first year to 18 months. We had served both she and her husband. They were older. And I remember being in a follow-up meeting. Her son was there and a male advisor, and we were talking about updating her documents. And I don't know if this was male, female, or just the empathy that you talked about. She was just really struggling. And struggling with making changes in some of the decisions. And her son was saying, look, it was you and Dad, but now it's just you. So think about what you want to do. Well, they had a close relationship. Even though she maybe didn't feel as strongly as her husband did about some of the charitable donations and things of that nature, she didn't want to dishonor him. And I remember saying to her, and faith was a very big part of their lives. And I said, look, the very best way that you can honor your husband is to pray about what to do and go do that, whether it's what he did or not. Yeah. His faith was more important to him than anything else. And she just started crying because she felt heard. And then she was able to, over time, execute her new documents and have peace about it. But you can't just say, oh, he's gone now, what do you want to do? And that's not meant to throw anyone under the bus. It's just that empathy that I think kicked in that moment.
But she needed that empathy to be liberated a little bit, to make a decision that she felt was right.
Right. And that the gentlemen weren't wrong.
Yeah.
In the facts. But sometimes you need more than just the facts.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, she's got to make the decision, and not everything can be controlled from the grave. And that's she probably needed to understand that, and her son was going to be accepting of it.
Right.
So that was good. So that's, again, in a way, you bridging that gap.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, and because in a way, there's always gaps in financial planning between what someone maybe desires and then what the goal and the ultimate plan's got to be, and then you bring it to a couple and what they think's right. There's sort of always bridging that gap, and you bring it back to you and working between with Kirk. There's some bridging the gaps in making things work. So I that's where I'm sort of seeing a big part of your strength come out, Kelly. And just looking at the strategist profile that you have, style of being able to bridge those gaps and put plans into action to fill them. And I think you've brought along a lot of nurturing has come along with that.
I guess that's learned behavior, according to my sons.
It would be. It would be. It's like I've had to learn those things too. And without without the process, it would have been harder to learn it because I had the blind spot. But I always say to people that there are also your values, and you've got a set of values driven towards human relationships. And sometimes, by knowing your behavioral talents, you more clearly in the blind spot of them, you can allow the relationship part to flourish. And I think some of that comes through showing how you understand what could happen to widows and that whole situation, even if it is a bit rational, in a way is bringing understanding to the table. It doesn't always have to be soft words,
Well, that's true. And I've had situations where I delivered harsher words than some of the others. But I had never really thought so much about myself with clients as a bridge. I had thought about that more from an operations standpoint, but being able to bridge that gap between what needs to be done and the emotions that someone might be feeling, and helping them navigate that, particularly in the situation where I've spent about the last 6 months working on a probate case where and this can be a challenge for a strategist. I know the steps that we need to take to administer an estate, but a big part of that is listening as long as I need to listen to that widow talk about her husband and empathize with I can't fully empathize with what she's feeling, but I know what loss feels like. And I had one bring an 8x10 framed picture of her husband and put it on the conference table during our meeting because she wanted me to understand who he was. And so to take the time to listen to that and not just jump into the agenda and the facts and here's the form.
Yeah. But I think you've sort of just nailed it for yourself, really, is if we said your identity and your higher elevated capability, or X factor, as I call it in working with clients, you know, if you put it around widows, is bridging the gap between actions and emotions in the planning for widows, and that can take place before that unfortunate life event, but inevitable event takes place, and it can happen after. Depending when you cross paths with the person.
Right.
Because I think there's unfortunately a lot of males out there, and the males tend to outlive the female and are often older to start with, don't understand that the planning isn't really for them, it's for their families.
That's exactly right. In fact, Kirk has something that he says often when we sit down with the couple. He'll say, we serve widows and future widows. Yeah. Because statistically, we're going to serve her a lot longer than we're going to serve him. Right.
And that's, you know, like that's probably likely to be the case in my family. I mean, I'm 11 years older than my wife and I've got 2 young children. I started late. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what it is. You know, every step I take these days, you know, whether it's preparing paperwork, making sure stuff's filed away, is just in case something happened. You know, mm-hmm. You're never really at the destination because you always think you can build more and more will come and whatnot. But you've also got to assume a little bit. It could be tomorrow, couldn't it? A tree could fall on you, or whatever happens, mm-hmm. you know. And but I think that this is a really key niche that you're in, that you've pegged, and this bridging the gap is something that, you know, you can do really well, Kelly.
And I like it.
Yeah. So is there anything, as we wrap up here, is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners? Any tips, thoughts, inspirations, books they should read, things they should do?
The thing that has helped me the most over the years, both personally and professionally, is to use the strategist profile. Embrace your profile. Embrace who you are. Don't fight against it, and don't try to be something else. Our team had a meeting today, and Nikki Evans did a little bit of training this morning, and we joked about the level of adaptation that's required with each profile, and the strategist, I think, is up there, maybe requires the most. But, you know, just learn who you are and embrace it, and don't try to change it. The good, the bad, and the ugly.
I think that's so important. It's just to love who you are. And if mm-hmm. you can love your strengths, then you can love people, you can be empathetic, you can love the relationships that you're going to build. And yeah, a strategist has adapting to do in relationships, but frankly, everybody does. Mm-hmm. You know,
to some degree, absolutely.
Yeah, everybody's got to do it, but the more that you can be authentic, and for you, the more you play bridging that gap and knowing that you've got these great gifts, you're home and host. It's great. So Kelly, thank you for spending time with me today. This has been very insightful, and I really love the work that you're doing with widows.
Thank you so much.
And future widows.
That's right. Current widows and future widows. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to participate. It's been very insightful to me.